The galaxy remembers everything. Every civilization that has ever risen from the primordial soup of a developing world, every species that has reached toward the stars with trembling appendages or tentacles or pseudopods, the galaxy remembers them all. It remembers in the ruins scattered across dead moons, in the quantum echoes of ancient broadcasts still traveling through the void, in the collective memory of the eldest races who have watched empires rise and fall like tides.
The galaxy keeps score. It measures worth in longevity, in technological advancement, in the sophistication of thought and the elegance of culture. For 200,000 years, the eldest collective has been the arbiter of this measurement, the keepers of galactic order, the wise shepherds who guide younger races toward enlightenment.
And the galaxy, High Curator Sereth thought bitterly, had measured wrong. She stood in what remained of the Hall of Infinite Wisdom on the eldest homeworld of Varthenis, surrounded by the psychic resonance of 200 millennia of accumulated knowledge. The crystalline walls that normally sang with the thoughts of 1 trillion minds across the collective were dimming, their luminescence fading like dying stars. Fewer minds contributed to the chorus now. So many fewer.
Sereth's form, tall, ethereal, composed of interwoven energy and consciousness more than physical matter, flickered with exhaustion. Her people, the Varthan, had evolved beyond crude biology 4 million years ago. They existed as patterns of thought held together by will and quantum entanglement, beings of pure intellect who had guided the younger races for longer than most species could comprehend.
They had thought themselves invulnerable. They had been wrong about that, too. The scourge had come 6 months ago, emerging from the galactic core like a plague. At first, the collective had dismissed it as a natural phenomenon, some previously unknown cosmic event that would pass, as all such things did. Then the first worlds went silent. Not destroyed, just empty. Stripped of all higher thought, all consciousness, all meaning.
The scourge didn't kill, it harvested. It consumed intelligence itself, leaving behind only base matter and simple chemical reactions. Worlds that had hosted civilizations for millennia became nothing more than biological soup, devoid of thought or purpose or awareness.
And it was spreading.
High Curator. The voice resonated in her consciousness. Kelvin, her assistant, one of the younger members of the collective at barely 30,000 years old. His thought pattern carried urgency and something Sereth recognized as fear. The human has arrived.
The human, singular, as if one representative from that young, primitive species could possibly matter now, as ancient empires crumbled and entire sectors fell silent before the scourge's advance.
But the collective had tried everything else. They had thrown their most sophisticated weapons at the scourge, quantum disruptors that could unmake matter at the subatomic level, consciousness bombs that could shatter entire telepathic networks, time distortion fields that could freeze whole star systems in temporal stasis. Nothing worked. The scourge adapted, evolved, consumed.
The collective had reached out to their vassal species, the younger races they had guided and shaped over millennia. Most had responded with sympathy and promises of aid that never materialized. A few had sent token forces that vanished as quickly as everything else, and some, shamefully, had closed their borders entirely, retreating into isolation and hoping the scourge would somehow pass them by.
Only the humans had responded with a simple message: "We'll send someone."
Sereth had nearly rejected the offer out of hand. Humanity was a footnote in collective records, a species barely 3 centuries into spaceflight, occupying a single unremarkable system on the galaxy's outer rim.
The eldest had observed them, of course, as they observed all developing species, and what they'd seen had been concerning.
Humanity was violent, primitive. They still waged wars on their homeworld, still killed each other over resources and ideologies and ancient grievances. They had reached the stars not through enlightenment, but through relentless, almost frightening competition among their own factions. Even their first contact with other species had been marked by wariness and suspicion rather than the joyful embrace of cosmic brotherhood.
The collective had debated whether to make formal contact at all. In the end, they'd sent a simple greeting and established minimal trade relations, expecting humanity would either destroy itself in time or gradually evolve towards something resembling civilization.
Now, with her people dying and her civilization crumbling, Sarath found herself about to meet with a representative of that crude, violent species, because there was no one else left to ask.
"Show them to the reception chamber," she thought to Kelvin, "and prepare it for physical interaction."
Most species the collective dealt with had evolved beyond pure physicality, existing as energy beings or consciousness networks or quantum probability fields. The reception chamber could accommodate such forms easily. But humans were still bound to flesh and bone, requiring atmosphere and gravity and all the other primitive necessities of biological existence. When Sereth materialized in the reception chamber, the human was already there. They stood, gender uncertain in their plain gray uniform, near the observation window, looking out at Varthenis's triple moons. The human was short by Sereth's standards, compact, with dark skin and close-cropped hair going gray at the temples. They turned as Sereth entered, and she was struck by the stillness of their gaze. No awe, no fear, no visible reaction to being in the presence of one of the galaxy's eldest races. Just calm observation. "High Curator Sereth," the human said, their voice quiet and measured. "Thank you for receiving me. I'm Admiral Amara Okonkwo, United Earth Defense Fleet." Admiral? A military title? Of course the humans would send a warrior. Sarath suppressed her disappointment and allowed her consciousness to shape into a form the human could better comprehend. A translucent humanoid figure, vaguely feminine, composed of soft blue light.
"Admiral Okonkwo, we appreciate your willingness to respond to our situation." The words felt strange, almost demeaning. The eldest did not ask for help, they provided it. "I must confess some surprise that Earth chose to send anyone at all, given our limited prior interaction." "You needed help. We came." The human's expression remained neutral. "That's what people do for each other, isn't it?" People. The word resonated oddly in Sarath's perception, as if humans and the Varthan were equivalent, mere equals separated by circumstance rather than millions of years of evolution. "Would you prefer another term?" The human, the admiral, tilted their head slightly. "Sentience? Sapience? We can use whatever makes you comfortable." "No, people is acceptable." Sarath gestured toward a seating area, watching as the human moved to a chair with economical grace. No wasted motion, no visible uncertainty. "Tell me, Admiral, what do you know of our current crisis?" "Only what you've broadcast publicly. An entity or phenomenon you call the Scourge, expanding from the galactic core, consuming or destroying consciousness across multiple sectors. 47 worlds silenced so far, with the rate of expansion accelerating. Your defensive efforts have proven ineffective." The Admiral's dark eyes were steady. "That's the sum of our intelligence. I'm hoping you can provide more detail."
47 worlds, 6 days ago, Sarath corrected, feeling something twist in her consciousness. 72 as of this morning. And yes, all our efforts have failed. We've lost fleets, research stations, entire colonies. Nothing we do seems to slow it down.
Have you identified what it is, its nature, its origin?
We believe. Serath paused, aware of how absurd the next words would sound. We believe it's a weapon, an ancient automated system, perhaps millions of years old, designed to eliminate advanced civilizations. It targets consciousness specifically. The more evolved, the more sophisticated the intelligence, the more powerfully it's affected.
And you've traced it to the galactic core?
Yes, that's where it first emerged. We think something must have activated it. Some threshold crossed, some ancient trigger awakened. Now it's spreading outward like a wave, methodically consuming every advanced species it encounters.
The Admiral was quiet for a moment, their expression thoughtful. You said it targets advanced civilizations specifically. More evolved species are affected more powerfully. What happens to simpler life forms?
They're untouched. Plants, animals, primitive organisms, they continue functioning normally. It's only sapient consciousness that the scourge eliminates. It's why our worlds appear intact after it passes. The buildings still stand, the technology still functions, but everyone who lived there is gone, reduced to biological matter with no thought behind it.
So it's selective, intelligence-specific. The Admiral leaned forward slightly. Has it affected any pre-spaceflight species? Primitive civilizations?
Serath felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. No. We've observed several developing species in affected sectors. They show no signs of impact. The scourge seems to pass over them.
Interesting. The humans stood and walked to the observation window, hands clasped behind their back. High Curator, I need you to be very honest with me about something. How did the collective view humanity before this crisis began?
The directness of the question startled Serath. Most species would never ask such a thing, would never risk offense by acknowledging the obvious hierarchy of galactic civilization, but the Admiral asked it as simply as requesting the time.
We considered you young, Serath admitted. Primitive, potentially dangerous due to your violent history and continued internal conflicts. We observed you but chose not to pursue deep relations because we believed you needed more time to evolve, to mature as a species.
You thought we were weak.
We thought you were undeveloped. There's a difference.
Is there? The Admiral turned, and something in their gaze made Serath uncomfortable. Not hostile, just knowing. High Curator, I am going to share something with you that might change your perspective. May I access your data networks? I'd like to show you rather than tell you.
Serath hesitated. Allowing a foreign consciousness access to collective systems was unprecedented. But what did protocols matter when her civilization was dying? She extended a tendril of thought, creating a secure interface.
The Admiral pulled out a small device, crude physical technology, and connected it to the interface. Immediately, Serath's consciousness flooded with data. Ship manifests, military deployments, industrial capacity metrics. And as she processed the information, she felt something like vertigo, even though her form had no physical orientation to lose.
This can't be right, she whispered. These numbers, this fleet size, it's impossible for a species at your developmental level.
The fleet you're seeing represents about 40% of Earth's total military capacity, the Admiral said quietly. And we can mobilize the rest within 6 days if needed.
But your entire economy, your population, your resources, this would require total militarization. You'd have to dedicate your entire civilization to war preparation.
We do. The Admiral's voice was soft, almost sad. "We have been, since the day we reached the stars and realized we were alone out here, vulnerable, surrounded by species millions of years more advanced than us, in a galaxy that doesn't care if we survive."
But you seem so peaceful. Your trade ships, your diplomats, the cultural exchanges we've observed are real. All of it's real. We want peace, High Curator. We want cooperation and friendship and all the beautiful things that make civilization worthwhile. The Admiral walked back toward her, each step deliberate. But we've learned that wanting peace and being prepared for war aren't contradictory. They're complementary. You can't have one without being ready for the other.
Sereth's consciousness reeled as she processed the implications. The galaxy thought Earth was weak, thought you were primitive and harmless.
I know. We were very careful about that impression. You deliberately made yourselves appear less capable than you were.
We showed exactly what we were. A young species, still figuring things out, still dealing with internal conflicts, still learning how to exist in a larger universe. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. We just didn't show you everything. We didn't advertise our defensive capabilities or our military doctrine or the fact that every human civilian receives basic combat training. We let the galaxy see us as small and new and non-threatening while we built the strength to ensure our survival.
That's, Sereth struggled for a concept that fit. Deceptive. It's prudent, High Curator. Your people have existed for millions of years. You've never had to hide, never had to pretend to be less than you were because you've always been among the strongest. Humanity doesn't have that luxury. We're infants in a galaxy of ancients. So yes, we were careful. We were quiet. We kept our swords sharp while smiling and making friends. The Admiral paused. And now that you need those swords, here we are. The silence that followed felt heavy with meaning. Sarath's mind churned through the revelations, reframing everything she thought she'd understood about humanity. The young species wasn't weak. They'd never been weak. They'd simply been smart enough to appear so while preparing for threats the eldest had never conceived of.
"Can you help us?" she asked finally, all pretense of superiority stripped away. "Against the Scourge?"
"I don't know yet," the Admiral said honestly. "But I can tell you this. If the Scourge specifically targets advanced consciousness and leaves primitive minds untouched, then humanity might be exactly what you need. We're not primitive, but we're new enough, simple enough, that we might be able to operate where your forces can't."
You think your relative lack of evolution is an advantage?
I think every species has advantages born from their specific circumstances. You've evolved beyond physical form, beyond individual consciousness into something collective and magnificent. That's beautiful. But it also makes you a perfect target for something designed to attack advanced thought. The Admiral gestured to themselves. We're still stuck in meat bodies with chemical brains. Maybe that makes us resistant. Maybe it makes us invisible to the Scourge's targeting systems. Maybe it makes us useless. But it's worth finding out. Sereth felt something unfamiliar stirring in her consciousness. Respect for this young species who had somehow grasped truths about survival that the eldest had forgotten in their millions of years of comfortable supremacy.
"What do you need from us?" she asked.
Everything you know about the Scourge, every encounter log, every sensor reading, every theory your best minds have developed, and access to an affected system where we can conduct tests without risking your remaining population. The Admiral's voice was firm, commanding. And High Curator, I need you to trust us. Even when what we do doesn't make sense to you, even when it seems wrong or primitive or beneath your standards. Can you do that?
Could she?
Could the eldest collective, arbiters of galactic civilization for 200,000 years, trust a species they dismissed as barely developed? The question would have been laughable 6 months ago. Now, with her people dying and her civilization crumbling, it was the only question that mattered.
Yes, Sereth said quietly. Yes, I can.
Over the next 4 days, Sereth watched as the human fleet arrived at Varthanus. She'd thought herself prepared after seeing the Admiral's Dea, but the reality was somehow more shocking than the numbers.
They came in waves, massive carriers, each one capable of holding thousands of smaller craft, destroyer squadrons moving in perfect formation, cruisers bristling with weapon systems that collective sensors couldn't fully analyze, and behind them, support vessels, supply ships, mobile construction platforms, hospital ships, and dozens of other specialized craft that spoke to a military machine refined over centuries of preparation.
The collective fleet, once the pride of the galaxy's most advanced civilization, looked almost quaint by comparison. Elegant, sophisticated, but designed more for show than serious combat. The human ships were different, functional, efficient, covered in armor and weapons with no wasted space for aesthetics. These were vessels built by a species that had learned war was a science to be perfected, not an unfortunate necessity to be prepared for half-heartedly.
High Curator, Admiral Okonkwo's voice came through the communication link. We're ready to begin operations. I'm sending you our tactical plan for review.
The plan materialized in Sereth's consciousness, and she nearly recoiled from it. It was audacious to the point of insanity. The humans intended to send a small strike force directly into a scourge-affected system, deliberately exposing themselves to the phenomenon that had destroyed every collective force that encountered it. They would gather data, test theories, and, if their hypotheses proved correct, map the scourge's structure and weaknesses.
"This is suicide," Sereth protested. "Everything we send into affected systems is destroyed or emptied. Your people will be consumed just like ours."
Maybe, the Admiral acknowledged. Or maybe our different neurology makes us resistant. Maybe our simpler consciousness doesn't trigger the Scourge's targeting protocols. We won't know until we try.
And if you're wrong? If your people die like everyone else? Then we'll know more than we did before, and we'll try something else. The human's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. High Curator, humanity has been fighting entropy and extinction since we first developed complex thought. We've learned that progress sometimes requires sacrifice, that knowledge comes at a price, and that the only way to truly fail is to stop trying.
Sereth wanted to argue, to forbid this reckless plan, but she had promised to trust them, and more importantly, she had no better options. "Do what you must," she said finally. She watched through long-range sensors as a single human corvette, a ship barely larger than a collective shuttle, approached the dead system of Carthan. Once home to 3 billion collective citizens, Carthan now orbited its star in silent horror. The cities still stood, the lights still functioned, but no consciousness remained to appreciate them.
The human ship crossed the boundary where collective vessels had always been destroyed, and it kept going.
Sereth felt her entire being tense as data streamed back from the Corvette. The crew was still alive, still conscious, still reporting. They were inside the affected zone, surrounded by the same presence that had annihilated collective forces, and they were unharmed.
"We're reading the Scourge as a distributed consciousness network," came the report from the Corvette's commander. "It's scanning for complex thought patterns, specifically those associated with advanced telepathic or quantum-based minds. Our biochemical neural architecture doesn't register as a target. It's essentially ignoring us."
"Can you analyze its structure?" Admiral Okonkwo asked.
Affirmative. Mapping now. It's beautiful, in a way. Incredibly complex, like a living mathematical equation spread across space-time. But it has nodes, concentration points where the consciousness is denser. If we could disrupt those nodes...
Could we destroy it?
Destroy? Maybe not. It's too distributed for that. But we might be able to fragment it, break its coherence, force it back to dormancy.
Sereth listened in growing amazement as the human crew calmly mapped out the thing that had terrified the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They moved through the affected system like scientists studying a dangerous animal, respectful but unafraid, gathering data with mechanical efficiency.
Admiral, Sereth sent. This is extraordinary. Your people are inside the scourge and it can't touch them. Why didn't we think of this? Why didn't we realize that simpler consciousness might be immune?
Because you're not simple, the Admiral said gently. You're magnificent, evolved, transcendent. You've spent millions of years growing beyond the limitations of biological thought. That magnificence is your strength, High Curator. But sometimes, strength in one area creates vulnerability in another. You grew so advanced that you forgot what it was like to be prey. Humanity never forgot that. We can't. It's written into every fiber of our being.
Over the next 10 days, Sereth watched as the human fleet executed a plan so comprehensive, so precisely coordinated, that it seemed to have been rehearsed for years rather than developed in mere days.
They established forward operating bases in systems adjacent to scourge-affected zones. They sent out dozens of scout ships, mapping the phenomenon's extent and identifying the nodes their initial reconnaissance had discovered. They coordinated with collective researchers, combining human tactical expertise with eldest scientific knowledge to develop a theoretical framework for understanding the scourge.
And they built weapons.
Not the elegant energy weapons the collective favored. Not quantum disruptors or consciousness bombs. The humans built crude physical weapons, massive kinetic impactors designed to destroy the scourge's nodes through sheer material force. They built them by the thousands, using industrial fabrication systems that churned out munitions at a rate that shocked even Sereth's advanced sensibilities.
"Where did you hide all this?" she asked the Admiral one evening as they reviewed the latest production figures. "This industrial capacity, this military infrastructure? We've been observing Earth for 3 centuries. How did we miss it?"
"You didn't miss it," Admiral Okonkwo said. "You just didn't recognize it. We've always been building, always preparing, but we called it commercial shipping, civilian infrastructure, research and development. Which was all true. We just made sure everything we built could be repurposed for defense if needed. Every cargo hauler can be converted to a troop transport. Every mining station has the equipment to manufacture munitions. Every research facility can pivot to weapons development.
Your entire civilization is designed for total war mobilization. Our entire civilization is designed to survive. War mobilization is just one aspect of that. The Admiral pulled up a display showing Earth's orbital infrastructure, dozens of massive stations, industrial complexes, research facilities. We learned something important in our history, High Curator. Peace is precious, but it's fragile. It only lasts as long as those who threaten it believe the cost of breaking it is too high. So we made sure the cost would be astronomical.
Deterrence through overwhelming force.
Deterrence through demonstrated capability and willingness to use it if necessary. We hoped we'd never have to, but when your people called for help, we were ready.
Sereth felt something that might have been shame. The collective had existed for 200,000 years on the assumption that advanced civilizations would naturally be peaceful, that evolution toward higher consciousness meant evolution beyond conflict. They had shaped galactic culture around that belief, gently guiding younger races away from militarism and toward enlightenment.
And it had left them defenseless when something beyond reason, beyond negotiation, beyond enlightenment had emerged from the dark. Humanity, dismissed as primitive and violent, had been preparing for exactly that scenario since the day they reached the stars. The offensive began on the 18th day after Admiral Okonkwo's arrival. The human fleet moved into position across 14 systems simultaneously. Thousands of ships, millions of personnel, all coordinated through communication systems that operated at speeds Sereth couldn't quite comprehend. The collective had always relied on telepathic links for instant communication, but that very capability made them vulnerable to the Scourge.
Humanity used electromagnetic signals, quantum-entangled relays, and other primitive technologies that the Scourge couldn't intercept or corrupt.
Sereth watched from the command center on Varthenis as the attack unfolded. Human ships swarmed into Scourge-affected systems, their crews protected by their simple biological consciousness. They identified the nodes, the concentration points where the Scourge's distributed intelligence was densest, and struck them with kinetic impactors traveling at significant fractions of light speed.
The results were immediate and dramatic. As each node was destroyed, the Scourge's coherence fractured. Its ability to coordinate and expand faltered. It began to retreat, pulling back toward the galactic core like a wounded animal seeking shelter.
"They're doing it," Kelvin whispered in Sereth's consciousness. "The humans are actually driving it back." But Sereth noticed something else in the data streams. The Scourge wasn't just retreating randomly. It was being herded, guided, pushed along specific vectors by the human fleet's movements. And at the end of those vectors, deeper in the core where the Scourge had first emerged, the humans were positioning something.
"Admiral," she sent, "what are you doing? You're not just destroying the nodes. You're directing the Scourge toward a specific location." "Observant as always, High Curator. We can't destroy something this vast and distributed, but we can contain it. We're driving it back to its origin point and preparing to seal it there."
"Seal it? How?"
Do you trust us?
The question hung in the space between them. Sarath thought about her civilization, billions of years old, brought to the edge of extinction by a threat they couldn't comprehend. She thought about humanity, young and crude and overlooked, now systematically dismantling that threat with clinical efficiency.
"Yes," she said, "I trust you."
What the humans had positioned at the galactic core was something the collective had never conceived of. A weapon so massive, so audacious, that it could only have been designed by a species that fundamentally understood existential stakes.
They had built a containment field generator, powered by the artificial collapse of 3 stars that would create a bubble of distorted space-time around the Scourge's origin point. Not a prison exactly. The Scourge was too vast to truly imprison, but a barrier, a wall in the fabric of reality itself that the Scourge's consciousness-based existence couldn't penetrate.
"When we activate this," Admiral Okonkwo explained, "the Scourge will be trapped in a pocket of space-time isolated from the rest of the galaxy. It won't be destroyed, but it won't be able to expand beyond that pocket. It'll be sealed away, potentially for millions of years."
"And if the seal fails?" Sereth asked. "Then we'll build another one, and another, as many as it takes." The Admiral's voice was firm. "This is what we do, High Curator. We find problems that seem insurmountable, and we solve them. We face enemies that should destroy us, and we survive. We look at the impossible, and we make it possible. Not because we're special, not because we're chosen, but because we refuse to give up." The containment field activated precisely on schedule.
Sereth watched through long-range sensors as space itself seemed to fold, creating a boundary that cut off a sphere of the galactic core roughly 12 light-years in diameter. Inside that sphere, the Scourge raged, its vast consciousness trapped and isolated. Outside, the galaxy began to breathe again.
Systems that had gone silent started reporting activity. Worlds the collective had thought lost showed signs of recovery as the Scourge's influence withdrew. The affected populations wouldn't return. Consciousness once consumed couldn't be restored, but the expansion had stopped. The threat was contained.
Humanity had done what the eldest collective, with all its millions of years of advancement, could not. In the aftermath, as human and collective forces began coordinating relief efforts for affected worlds, Sarath found herself standing once more with Admiral Okonkwo in the reception chamber on Varthinus.
"Your people saved us," Sarath said quietly. "Saved the galaxy, and we treated you as primitives, as children barely worthy of notice." "You treated us according to your understanding," the Admiral said, without rancor. "And your understanding wasn't wrong exactly. We are young. We are less evolved. We do still struggle with violence and conflict and all the messy realities of biological existence. Those things are true. But we missed what they meant. We thought youth equaled weakness. We thought simplicity meant inferiority."
Most species do, the Admiral smiled slightly. It's natural to measure others by your own standards. The collective values transcendence, evolution beyond base matter, the perfection of consciousness. By those standards, humanity is primitive. But there are other standards, other measures of strength.
Adaptability, resilience, the ability to operate in environments where your advantages don't apply.
Among others, yes. The Admiral walked to the observation window, looking out at the fleet, human and collective ships now working in coordination. "High Curator, can I ask you something?"
Of course.
What will the galaxy learn from this? When word spreads that Earth intervened, that humanity contained the Scourge, what conclusions will the other civilizations draw?
Sereth considered the question carefully. Some will feel gratitude, some will feel shame for not helping when we called, and some, she paused, acknowledging the uncomfortable truth, some will feel fear. They'll realize that Earth has capabilities far beyond what anyone believed, that humanity has been preparing for war on a scale that dwarfs most galactic militaries. They'll wonder what else you've been hiding.
Will they be afraid of us?
Some will, yes. The Admiral nodded slowly. And they won't be entirely wrong to be. Humanity is dangerous. We are capable of terrible things. Our history is written in blood and fire. Every advantage we used to defeat the Scourge, our military coordination, our industrial capacity, our willingness to sacrifice, those same advantages could make us a threat if we chose to be one.
Will you? Choose to be one?
No. The word was simple, definitive. But we'll make sure everyone knows we could if we needed to. That's the paradox of peace, High Curator. It only works when violence is an option that everyone chooses not to take. You can't build lasting peace from weakness, only from mutually respected strength.
Sereth absorbed this, recognizing the wisdom in it even as it contradicted everything the collective had believed for millennia. They had thought enlightenment meant transcending violence, evolving beyond the capacity for war. Humanity suggested something different, that true civilization meant choosing peace while remaining capable of war. The difference was subtle but profound.
"What will Earth do now?" she asked. "Will you join the collective? Take your place among the galactic powers?"
We'll maintain our relationships,
strengthen our alliances, continue building friendships with species who want to know us. The Admiral turned back toward her. But join the collective as it currently exists? No, we can't. Your organization is built on assumptions that recent events have proven false. About advancement, about evolution, about what it means to be civilized. Those assumptions nearly cost you everything.
So you would have us change? Rebuild?
I would have you learn. The same way we'll learn from you. The same way every species in this galaxy needs to learn from each other. The Admiral's expression was earnest. You have knowledge humanity won't possess for millions of years, understanding of consciousness, of physics, of cosmic truths we can barely imagine. We need that. But you need what we have too, our adaptability, our resilience, our hard-earned lessons about survival in a hostile universe.
Neither of us is complete without the other. Sareth felt something shift in her perception. For 200,000 years, the collective had seen itself as the teachers, the guides, the wise elders showing younger races the path to enlightenment. The idea that they might have something to learn from those younger races, especially from one as young as humanity, had never seriously been considered.
But the scourge had taught them humility, and humanity had demonstrated that wisdom could come from unexpected sources.
Then we will learn, Sareth said softly. We will remember what you did for us, how you saw strength where we saw weakness, how you succeeded where we failed, and we will ensure the galaxy remembers too.
Just make sure they remember the right lessons, the Admiral said. Don't let them think Earth is weak just because we're young, but don't let them think we're monsters just because we're strong. We're people, High Curator. Complicated, flawed, struggling people trying to survive and build something better in a universe that doesn't care about our dreams. Same as every species. Same as you.
In the weeks that followed, word of humanity's intervention spread across the galaxy. The reactions were exactly as Sareth had predicted: gratitude, shame, and fear in equal measure. Species that had dismissed Earth as insignificant suddenly wanted alliances. Governments that had ignored humanity's existence now sent urgent diplomatic overtures. Military observers appeared in human space, quietly trying to assess the true extent of Earth's capabilities.
And everywhere, the same question echoed. How had they missed it? How had the galaxy failed to realize that Earth was never weak?
The answers varied. Some blamed poor intelligence. Some blamed arrogance. Some blamed the fundamental assumptions baked into the Galactic civilization about what strength looked like and where it could be found. But Sareth knew the truth was simpler and more challenging. They had seen exactly what humanity showed them and assumed they were seeing everything. They had measured Earth by their own standards and found it wanting, never considering that different circumstances might produce different kinds of strength.
The galaxy had realized too late that Earth was never weak. It had only been patient, careful, and smart enough to build strength while letting others underestimate them.
6 months after the scourge was contained, Sareth stood once more in the Hall of Infinite Wisdom. The crystalline walls were bright again, singing with the thoughts of 1 trillion minds. The collective was recovering, slowly rebuilding what had been lost. But something had changed. The consciousness song that filled the hall was different now, tempered by humility, enriched by hard-won wisdom, more complete for having acknowledged its own limitations. Kelvin joined her, his thought pattern curious. "What are you thinking about, High Curator?" "About assumptions," Sareth said. "About how many things we believed simply because we'd never been challenged to question them.
about how close we came to extinction because we confused advancement with invulnerability.
And about humanity? And about humanity, she acknowledged. About a species we dismissed as children who turned out to be exactly what we needed. About the fact that strength comes in forms we never anticipated. About how much we still have to learn, despite our millions of years of existence.
The Council has been discussing formal changes to collective doctrine, Kelvin offered. Recognition that technological and consciousness advancement isn't the only measure of civilization, that younger species may possess valuable perspectives we lack. Some are even suggesting humanity should have a seat on the High Council.
They should, Sarath said firmly. Not as juniors to be mentored, but as equals with different strengths. The galaxy needs to understand that age doesn't automatically confer wisdom, that advancement in one direction can mean vulnerability in another, and that every species, every civilization has something unique to contribute. Some of the older members won't like that.
Some of the older members nearly got us all killed with their assumptions, Sareth said sharply. It's time for new thinking. Past time.
She accessed the communication network and sent a message to Earth, to Admiral Okonkwo, simple and direct.
Thank you for everything, for responding when no one else would, for seeing possibilities where we saw only doom, for being strong when we couldn't be. The galaxy owes you a debt we can never fully repay. But we will remember, and we will learn. That is the least we can do to honor what you taught us.
The response came hours later, just as simple.
No debt, no thanks necessary. We did what people do for each other, what we all should do for each other. Build something better together. That's enough.
Sareth shared the message with the full council, and as it propagated through the collective consciousness, she felt something like relief wash through the minds of the eldest. Humanity bore no grudge, sought no advantage from having saved them, wanted only what they had always wanted, to be treated as equals, as people, as valuable members of the galactic community.
The galaxy had realized too late that Earth was never weak. But perhaps it wasn't too late to learn from that realization, to build a new kind of galactic civilization where strength was recognized in all its forms, where youth was valued alongside age, where every species contributed their unique perspective to the collective wisdom.
Perhaps it wasn't too late to become worthy of the lesson humanity had taught them.
And across the galaxy, on a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, humanity continued doing what it had always done: living, building, preparing, growing stronger not through conquest or domination, but through relentless, patient, careful development of every capability that might someday be needed.
The rest of the galaxy had finally noticed, finally realized what had always been there, hidden in plain sight behind a facade of youth and simplicity.
Earth had never been weak.
They had simply been waiting to be needed.